Struggle is we struggle, and we don't look for trouble, just ask around. But when outside faces from foreign places talk about taking over, we ain't backing down. We ain't giving up no mountains, we ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one courage, not a blade of grass. This land is all I know. We gonna make it somehow. We will bend like a bow and never break. Our fathers came here, and they lived and died here, and we ain't moving nowhere. Make no mistake, 'cause we ain't giving up no mountain, we ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one courage, not a blade of grass. We love the open country of the Rupununi and the Essequibo, the time when though we may criticize it, this is our home, we love it, and we need to keep it. We have that right, so we ain't giving up no mountain, we ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one courage, not a blade of grass. So we ain't giving up no mountains, we ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one courage, not a blade of grass. We are a peaceful people, struggle is we struggle, and we don't look for trouble, just ask around. But when outside faces from foreign places we are a peaceful people, struggle is we struggle, and we don't look for trouble, just ask around. But when outside faces from foreign places talk about taking over, we ain't backing down. We ain't giving up no mountains, we ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue.
Thank you, honorable members. Please be seated. At 6:25 p.m. and running now, I'd like to call on the honorable member, the Deputy Speaker of the House, the honorable member, Mr. Leonard Schumann, to make his presentation.
Mr. Speaker, as I rise to make my contribution to this rich, and I say that again, to this rich discussion on Budget 2021, I ask the House's indulgence, as I'm sure some acknowledgements are in order. I wish to first acknowledge Guyana's 51st year as a republic and wish everyone a happy, belated 51st Republic anniversary. I would also like to commend the stellar program put together by the Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport, the Honorable Charles Ramsden Jr., and his staff, and the fantastic performers whose talents were on display on the night of the 22nd of February, 2021. For the first time in the history of Guyana, as an Indigenous person, I felt at home. I felt at home in my own land. Something that many of my brothers and sisters still do not enjoy. And for good reason. Guyana has never been kind to its first peoples. I was moved by the mosaic display that night, felt quite happy. So much talent in Guyana that is yet to be realized. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, I wish to commend the Minister of Finance, Dr. the Honorable Ashni Singh, and the work of his team at the Ministry of Finance. It was no doubt a challenge to table a second budget in under 6 months, a task they undoubtedly proved that they are more than equal to, and I wish to thank them. I also wish to acknowledge the bold step by the Opposition Chief Whip, the Honorable Christopher Jones, that the major opposition represents 49% of the electorate. An acknowledgement, while so long overdue, shows that there is scope for political maturity in this House. Mr. Speaker, it is there where I wish to enter this discussion with one word: people. I have no intention of screaming like my colleagues who absent themselves through this, my presentation, who, in my view, think that by raising the decibels, they elevate in substance and relevance. I ask my colleagues to listen and listen quite attentively. I do not intend to scream. Mr. Speaker, it is only fitting that we are in this August House, evaluating our progress over the last 51 years as a republic and debating on what will transpire through 2021 and how we set the stage for the future of Guyana. I do believe that while our approach may differ, our vision, all of us, hopefully, is to see Guyana progress. We are at a crossroads in this country's history, Mr. Speaker, and recognizing that is important. Mr. Speaker, I have been allotted 30 minutes. And I may be graciously granted an additional 5 if my colleagues see my contribution as valuable to this discourse. But I doubt that I will need it as I dispatch with some of the fallacies and fantasies of the discussions here. Mr. Speaker, I sat quietly in my seat on day 1 of these budget debates and attentively heard the first presenter in these debates, the Honorable Amanza Walton Desir, who not only attempted to cultivate racism in this honorable House, but also sought to wipe away the growing center of Guyana when she said, and I quote from the Hansard that was furnished to me, "We have to decide in this hour whether Guyana will be the land where the children of Chatri or the daughters of the Dahomey will live together. A grossly reckless and irresponsible exclusionary statement without even a flinch or even batting an eye, wiping from the rich tapestry of Guyana all of our sisters and brothers of Chinese, Portuguese, European, and of course, the first peoples of Guyana, the Indigenous peoples, in one fell swoop. This, Mr. Speaker, is precisely why we see this political dispensation and may further contribute clarity to their political disposition. A right offensive exclusion that I hope the honorable member who is absent here will take the time to correct, as it is an Indigenous person standing right here in this house educating her. I sat and I listened to the Honorable Natasha Singh Lewis refer to me in her presentation, and I quote, as the late Deputy Speaker, Honorable Lennox Schumann. I wish to inform the honorable member that I'm very much alive. But I cannot in good conscience permit such recklessness and triviality to pass so quietly for a variety of reasons, Mr. Speaker. Firstly, it is indicative of the way the PNC treated not only Indigenous peoples of Guyana, but all Guyanese. Mr. Speaker, if one cannot see the Deputy Speaker standing at 5'11", 225 pounds in front of her, how can we expect them to see the people suffering? And how would they even proceed to develop policies for those they cannot see? Mr. Speaker, on February 20th, 2021, I wrote the following, and I quote, "Today would have been 98 years. His stain on this nation led us to the events championed by his prodigy in 2020. A legacy we must never forget. Deserving of no celebration, nothing to celebrate. Just a mere acknowledgement is plenty of tribute. We still struggle for the nation of dreams for our next generations." When a mind hasn't the competence to address the substantive issue, they recluse themselves to mediocrity, and that mediocrity, Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, is race. Quite a travesty. Mr. Speaker, I would challenge anyone in this honorable House to name, identify, describe, or any word synonymous with any of those that reflects an iota of racism in component, content, or substance in that statement. And I read it again, not for your consumption, Mr. Speaker, but for the consumption of my colleagues in this honorable House. And I say, today would have been 98 years. His stain on this nation led us to the events championed by his prodigy in 2020. Deserving of no celebration, nothing to celebrate, just a mere acknowledgement is plenty a tribute. And here is the absence in their evaluation, and it is a truism. We still struggle for the nation of dreams for our next generations. Mr. Speaker, I challenge any and all of my colleagues in this House to find the falsity or racist undertones in those few short sentences. That statement is not inaccurate, Mr. Speaker. But once again, where substance and relevance are absent, racism becomes the default cover, and I urge my colleagues to change this appalling and horrendous behavior, because when it comes to this honorable House, it creates a destructive tsunami in society. It was in this very same building that we, Me and my colleagues attended not for 1 month. We guarded ballot boxes and then struggled through a tiring and exhaustive recount. Legal proceedings, and I should have a law degree by now, to ensure that Guyana never goes back to the Barnum-era rigging. Those are facts, Mr. Speaker. There is no falsity in that statement. Those are facts. It's a matter of history. My colleagues have said on many occasions, as is constantly perpetuated by the Honorable Ganesh Mahipal, who also absent himself for this, that we are PPP subsets. Mr. Speaker, I say this unapologetically. If it means that I stand on the side of and fight for democracy, then I am a subset. If it means that I have vision for a progressive Guyana free from oppression, then I am a subset. If it means that I am against a dictatorship, then I am a subset. If it means that I am against intellectually bankrupting a country, then I am a subset. If it means that I am for Indigenous rights, then I am a subset. And if it means that I am on the side of an inclusive Guyana, then I most definitely and unapologetically am a subset. Mr. Speaker, I say that because I know that before we can heal as a nation, we must first identify where it is hurting and work to fix it. That I ate sand, mud, soap, lead, wood, candle wax, eggshells, peanut shells, and a list too long to call under Barnum. It is a difficult memory, Mr. Speaker. My honorable friends may have had the so-called good life through those times, and that is good for them. But we suffered, and that experience and memory cannot be downplayed nor taken away, and I will fight to ensure that we never return to those days. It was Mr. Barnum, Mr. Jagan, and Mr. Stephen Campbell who fought for this country's independence. No doubt for their times, their contributions were needed, but to downplay one's suffering does not erase it. If my colleagues were starving during the PPP's tenure, if they ate candle wax, if they ate eggshells, mud, sand, soap, and wood during the PPP's tenure, you have my heartfelt sympathies, and I urge you to let's work to fix that. But race, Mr. Speaker, is not the answer. That I advocate for the rights of Indigenous peoples does not make me a racist. I simply identify the shortcomings of administrations in this country in their 207 years obligation to the Indigenous peoples through a variety of treaties in this country's history. When you lack substance, the default cannot be race, Mr. Speaker. It is unbecoming of a nation that is 54 years old. Mr. Speaker, yesterday I exited the Dome because an honorable thought that screaming at the top of her voice would add substance and relevance. I struggled to find either in what she was saying. Maybe the PNC found it. I recall being accused of screeching by with the so-called leftover votes and fractional seat just to be here. But I asked the honorable member, who absent herself once again, where is the AFC? The PNC is so far conjoined in the AFC, or vice versa, that one cannot tell where the PNC ends and where the AFC begins. How many votes did the AFC get? And I beg them to show me. How many votes did the AFC get? Show me a singular policy or absolutely anything that the AFC did. Anything. I should have prefaced that and asked for them to show me something positive and constructive that they did. but that, Mr. Speaker, is absent. And of course, the million-dollar questions are, did you see the SOPs? And where are your SOPs? I understand that numeracy may be lost on the honourable member. That is why I tried to keep numerical reference to 2 digits, cautiously and strenuously, because I know that the majority of 65 causes them a year's worth of challenge and too much of a headache. We, the Liberty and Justice Party, got 2,957 votes, Mr. Speaker. If you were to ask me, the majority of that is 1,479, and we did not have to try to rig an election to get those. The people simply identified that the PNC failed and voted for us. And many others voted for our colleagues in the PPP, ANOG, TCI, TNM, URP, OVP, and PRP. Ghost. Mr. Speaker, I did not want to get into defending the budget presented by Dr. the Honorable Ashby Singh. It does that all by itself. The budget defends itself. Considering where we are at this juncture in the country's history, and considering what we endured for the last 5 years, the budget is not perfect, but I quite agree with the Honourable Minister of Finance and the Honourable Minister of Social Protection. A path to recovery, economic dynamism, and resilience. In layman's terms, because I think some people have difficulty understanding words. In layman's terms, it is to repair the damage, to stabilize the financial ground, and to fortify for a better and more progressive Guyana. And the answer is not to pander to race. If you lack substance, lack relevance, and lack moral and ethical fortitude to say you lost the elections, do you yourself and our future generations a disservice by reclusing to race baiting. That we have $630 million for the revival of the Amerindian land titling program is far superior than what was done under the PNC rule for the last 5 years. The entire Anai sub-district was gazetted as an NDC, thus revoking the land title of the Indigenous peoples of that area, a clear violation of a multitude of international laws. That there is $1.6 billion in the budget for upgrading hinterland roads is not the most ideal, but it is far superior to the next to nothing that was previously budgeted. The PNC voted against over $500 million for 112 tractors, $880 million, over $1.5 billion for COVID support to communities to assist the revival of their communities. That was without a doubt far superior to anything the PNC did in 5 years. And that was done, majority of it, last year. Tushawos are in need of a raise of stipend. The NTC is in need of funding equal to its task, Mr. Speaker. These are absences that need to be corrected, but we cannot only compartmentally look at the budget, Mr. Speaker. We have to be practical. 2022 is but a short 10 months away. My community of Pakuri will benefit from a grid upgrade and expansion this year. I cannot disagree with progress, but I urge my colleagues to let's be clear-sighted in our obligation to hold the government accountable. I do not need to defend the budget, Mr. Speaker. The Minister of Finance, they will do that. The budget also defends itself. Mr. Speaker, the ADF is replenished to the tune of $1.5 billion. How can I be against anything that stands to benefit the most marginalized population of this country? Mr. Speaker, I recognize that this is the government's first full-year budget. And what I will say without reservation is that I expect that His Excellency's One Guyana vision, that the budgeted amount for the Honorable Prime Minister's office in driving this One Guyana contains the necessary and requisite funds for a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. A most needed commission in this country if we are to dispense with race politics. If we are to build a cohesive Guyana, we need it and the country needs it, Mr. Speaker. And I hope the Honorable Prime Minister is paying attention to that statement. I see this as a starting point to addressing equity, not only for Indigenous peoples, but for all of Guyana. I expect that the UNICEF study on the status of Indigenous women and children, a point that is lost on my colleague who claims that he's from GAP, but we know he's PNC, will be more prominently articulated in the next and future budgets. That Article 149G of the Constitution of Guyana becomes the major consideration in future budgets when addressing Indigenous issues. That the government does not forget its commitment to not only revising the Amerindian Act, but also to their long-standing commitment to constitutional reform, and that we see these commitments articulated in the next budget. I look forward to the budget measures that address the removal, and I will say this, that the budget measures that address the removal of the Save and Accept clause from Indigenous land titles, and I will support that 100%. This, Mr. Speaker, will enable the fulfillment of the 1814 commitment for Indigenous or Amerindian land titles, whichever you want to call it, a desperately needed removal. Mr. Speaker, I heard my colleagues speak of consultation for this budget. I hear Article 13 of the Constitution being thrown around. But Article 13 cannot be taken in absence of Article 9, which speaks of sovereignty. When people exercise their rights under Article 9 of the Constitution of Guyana, Article 13 is correlatingly activated. I am happy to say, while there is no law directing the government to consult with the opposition parties on the presentation of a budget, I was happy to see some of our concerns addressed and that we were consulted in this budget. There is no obligation for that. And I remind my colleagues, Mr. Speaker, March 2nd, 2021 will mark 1 year when the consultation was completed and the people spoke and they endorsed a vision that now sees me sitting in the opposition side. They endorse a vision presented by the PPP government, and we on this side of the House now have an obligation to hold the government accountable. That is our position. To my colleagues on this side of the House, I implore you, we have to up our game. You have to up your game. You cannot accept the bangles, bracelets, and bed sheets and be expected to be taken seriously. We must conduct ourselves with integrity if we are to ensure that the people are the primary beneficiaries of the budget. We cannot take a hard-headed, do-for-do-no-obio approach. That will always be a race to the bottom, and the people will end up and have always ended up being the losers in that system. The PAC, Public Accounts Committee, now becomes the focal point of accountability, and we must conduct ourselves with integrity if we are to be taken seriously. They are the government, and we are the opposition. And as the opposition, if we do not want our slip to show, we cannot slip. I ask my colleagues I ask my colleague, who absented himself here again, the Honorable David Patterson, to kindly resign and give a member of the kind of integrity to keep the government accountable and ensure the government delivers what they committed to and do so transparently and accountably. Mr. Speaker, I give this budget a B-. Not because of the substance of the budget, but because of how long it took us as a nation to get here. It is an indictment of us as a nation. It is an indictment of all of us that it took us this long to get here. I look forward to examining the budget measures, especially as I have said before, and while the taxpayers continue to pay the hecklers to my right and the hecklers to my left, because that is all they'll be doing for the next 5 years, that maybe they could turn and focus their attention on the important things of holding the government accountable and stop reflecting on their failed attempt to rig the elections where we stood to check them. So, Mr. Speaker, I circle back to this very one word where I started. We have a responsibility to the people of Guyana. And I, Mr. Speaker, endorse this budget because it does for Guyana what is needed. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker. It's an honor for me now to call to the microphone the Honorable Member, Ms. Annette Ferguson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise from this side of the House on behalf of the Partnership for National Unity and the Alliance for Change in joining my colleagues to contribute to this budget debate 2021. I personally would like to express appreciation to all technical officers at the various ministries and agencies, including the budget staff at the Ministry of Finance, for putting together the final document for Budget 2021. We know that this is a difficult time for our public servants due to the challenges of the pandemic, but also because of the tremendous uncertainty working under the PPPC brings. Salary increases, who knows? Mr. Speaker, Guyana's public servants were never in doubt that the government was in their corner under the APNU AFC. To the honorable member, Ms. Gail Teixeira, kindly accept my commiseration on the passing of your father. I would like to leave these words with you, taken from the first book of the New Testament, Matthew 5, verse 4. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. The month of February in every calendar year is special to many of us. To my Guyanese brothers and sisters, including honorable members, I publicly extend Happy Black History Month. Additionally, I wish to state that I am a proud African ancestry, and I will not allow no one to define who I am. Sir, permit me a few minutes to address a matter that is of concern to me. The attitude of some members on the opposite side of the House has been very vulgar. Mr. Speaker, was it necessary for an MP to bring a female personal pleasure device to the floor of this esteemed House? Mr. Speaker, that is a piece of contraband. It is illegal to import. Would this MP not have been able to explain his point using words? Why is this vulgarity necessary? This has left a bitter taste in my mouth. I can't believe that this is what this august House has descended to, sir. We do have our differences, but we do not need to descend to this. We need to get on with the business of our nation. We are here to develop Guyana. We are here to improve the lives of our people. We are here to help build them the good life. That is a mantra preached by a partnership for national unity since 2011, even prior to the formation of the coalition in February of 2015. Sir, the theme of the budget, as indicated on its cover, is a pathway to recovery, economic dynamism, and resilience. There is a common saying that a book should not be judged by its cover and clarity. In this case, we need to take heed. I have carefully examined this document and recognize that a number of essential factors and elements are lacking, since there is no clear direction to or plan outline to realize the budget theme. More so, there is very little included to combat the global pandemic, COVID. What I can say, though, sir, the introductory remarks, pages 1 through to 5, are laced with political platitudes. The honorable member at paragraph 1.13 on page 3 clearly paraphrased what the Honorable Irfan Ali stated when he addressed the Parliament on February 12, 2021. He said it was a government of oneness. Well, sir, the big unanswered question I have is this: how can one speak of oneness while failing to confront racism? A charge the honorable members on the other side dislike hearing from one side of the population. Discrimination, victimization, disunity, and the unfair treatment of innocent Guyanese. This includes political witch hunting against renowned qualified Guyanese and so-called political activists. Sir, the PPP cannot speak of oneness when they are targeting Guyanese for discrimination. This is the opposite of what happened under the coalition government. From the very get-go, an olive branch was extended to the dead opposition, Comrade Speaker, which they all rejected. The abandonment of the Ministry of Social Cohesion is a perfect example of their disregard for national unity. Sir, how can you speak of oneness when Guyanese witnessed the major electoral fraud east coast of Demerara, where 49 boxes have missing documents, and you coming here to call us riggers on this side? Is it because we are African Guyanese? But let me remind you what took place in 2006 with the AFC seat in Linden, where you had the former Prime Minister of Guyana squatting. What happened in 2015 when the PPPC used Gokul Guru to insert fake statements of polls? Let the nation know that. How can you speak of oneness when Guyanese witnessed the trampling of the Constitution, all to fulfill the PPP's hunger for power by any means necessary? How can you speak of oneness when the majority of the people's representatives were forcibly locked from entering the precepts of the National Assembly without a reasonable explanation? How can you speak of oneness when the main opposition was not consulted during the preparation of Budget 2021? How can you speak of oneness when the main opposition is not afforded opportunities to serve on state and statutory boards? How can you speak of oneness when Afro-Guyanese are denied lands illegally? How can you speak of oneness? And Comrade Speaker, you know what touched my heart today? As I was making my way into the precepts of the National Assembly, you know what was told to me? I asked the Minister of Housing for a piece of land. And you know what the Minister, the Honorable Colin Kroll, said to African Guyanese? You got money for pay land? What are you saying to Afro-Guyanese? We don't deserve lands? What a shame, sir. How can you speak of oneness? How can you speak of oneness when Guyanese occupying lands in the success area were shut?
Minister Kroll.
Yes. Standing Order 40A. The honorable member is referring to something that does not exist, and I would like her to prove her case. Can't come to this house and
Honorable
speak like.
member, you are attributing words to the honorable minister which he says doesn't exist.
Did I have a conversation with the honorable member? Huh?
What's your standing? I don't know why he's standing. Where are you standing, sir? Where are you standing?
Honorable members, the attributing of a statement to anyone, especially a member who was denying it, the person making the allegation needs to provide the proof. In this case, Honorable Ms. Ferguson, you'll have to withdraw that. Because unless you have him taped, you'll have to withdraw. And we'll give you back your time.
Proceed.
And we, honorable members, I'm speaking, and I see the honorable member, Vince Roy Jordan, is shouting at the presenter. That's total disrespect. Oh, yes.
Thank you very much.
Honorable member, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I was merely repeating what was told to me. But, right?
But the issue is, that would be hearsay.
That is okay, sir. That is okay. Huh? Huh? I'm so guided, sir. How can you speak of oneness?
Thank you. Go ahead, Honorable.
When Guyanese occupying lands in the success area were shot using rubber pellets and their lands flooded? How can you speak of oneness when the families of young Joel and Isaiah and Harris Singh are still to get justice? How can you speak of oneness when approximately 1,500 public servants were unlawfully displaced from their jobs by the People's Progressive Party Civic? And sir, as we're now debating Budget 2021, earlier today, via social media, it has been reported that 45 nurses from region number 4, they have been terminated. How can you speak of oneness when affording food is an issue? How can you speak of oneness when the distribution of the COVID-19 relief cash grant is being done in a discriminatory manner? How can you speak of oneness when public servants were willfully denied salary increases for the year 2020 and where Budget 2021 has failed to make mention of an increase? Sir, I wish to admonish the installed honorable members with what is written in the good book, the Old Testament, Deuteronomy 32:35, and I quote,
Honorable members, the honorable member needs to get your ear. If not, you can't provide a running commentary. Thank you. Go ahead.
Pardon?
I'm speaking to honorable members
Okay.
who was what I consider being very noisy.
Thank you very much for your protection, Comrade Speaker. Sir, I wish to admonish the installed honorable members that what is written in the good book, taken from the Old Testament, Deuteronomy 32:35, vengeance is mine and recompense. Their foot shall slip in due time, for the day of their calamity is at hand, and the things to come hasten upon them. Today, what is evident before our eyes since post-August 2nd, 2020, I can only describe as political vengeance. This is injurious to our people, systems of governance, and by extension, our nation. Sir, I now turn my attention to address issues highlighted in Budget 2021. Sir, it is my desire before departing this good life to see every Guyanese be provided a house lot to construct their dream house. My colleague, the Honorable Shara Duncan, earlier in the week addressed matters under the housing sector. Sir, after careful examination of the budget speech and the estimates for subsequent considerations, I do believe that I can refute the misinformation that continues to be parroted by the installed regime in the media. Firstly, sir, I make no apology in cautioning the honorable members on the other side that the truth always prevails when facts tell a different narrative. Growing up as a child, my parents always reminded myself and siblings of the famous proverb, speak the truth and speak it ever, cost it what it will. When one examines budgets 2020 and 2021 respectively, one will stumble on the catchy promise, 50,000 house lots within the 5 years. This is meant to give Guyanese false hope. Sir, the PPP's track record is there, and it reveals that at no time in the PPP's 23 years in office did they ever provided 50 house lots to the Guyanese within any 5 years period. Mr. Speaker, even half of that has never been produced. How is the PPPC to do now what they could never do throughout their 23 years in government? Honorable Member Colin Crowell, during his submission of Budget 2020, provided a miscalculated comparative analysis on house lot distributions, claiming that in 2014, Mr. Speaker, the PPPC allocated 2,440 house lots as against 776 in 2018 by the APNU. Sir, what the honorable member failed to tell us then, which I will now reveal to this House and the people of Guyana, is that between 2012-2014, the PPPC distributed a total of 11,342 house lots, of which 149 out of 570 were turnkey houses in the plantation perseverance area in region number 4. Sir, in reading the actual budget speech, I discovered that the honorable members on the opposite side have a major problem with numbers. I invite you to turn to page 49, paragraph 4.132, lines 1 to 3 of the budget speech. This is what the Honorable Ashley Singh, Dr. Ashley Singh, said, and I quote, "In the housing sector, works are progressing apace to restore the lost vibrancy and vitality that once exemplified the sector before the PPPC's government office demitted office in 2015. And this is what he had to say: a total number of house lots that the PPP distributed, a total number of house lots, 22,946 in 5 years. But sir, I wish to debunk this misinformation and to remind this House that the total number of house lots distributed by the PPPC between 2012 to 2014, as I said before, 11,342. Perhaps the Honorable Minister and his two colleagues in the housing sector can provide clarity and state where the number 22,946 arises from. So I recall reading the 2020 manifesto of the PPPC, and on page 8, this is what they sold to Guyanese. PPPC developed and distributed 112,761 house lots to Guyanese families, of which 80% was low income in 23 years. But Speaker, this is far from the truth. Or this is far from the truth and facts. My research revealed, Mr. Speaker, that it is approximately 60,000 house lots that were distributed in the 23 years of the PPPC rule in government. I have the evidence here, sir. Additionally, sir, the honorable member in his 2020 budget presentation on page 20 stated, in 2014, under the PPPC, 4,079 transports were processed. At the best, the coalition did 2,556 transports. And its worst, it did 1,207 over the period 2015 to 2019. Sir, again, I repeat for emphasis, honorable members do have difficulties with numbers and also facts and fictions. You know what your father do with it with your niece in West Coast Bobbies. Let me assist the honorable members in distinguishing fiction from facts. Sir, my former colleague and Minister of Communities, honorable member Ronald Bulkan, is on record on December 5th, 2019, As providing an assessment on the ministry's performance for the year 2019, he reported, over the last 4 years, the coalition government, through the Central Housing and Planning Authority, has delivered some 14,000 land titles, a representation of close to 4,000 titles per annum. Again, I challenge the honorable members to refute the facts. Sir, the installed members continue to promulgate that the coalition government has done nothing for the housing sector. Well, sir, if one is to measure 2012 to 2014 of the PPPC's track record for the period as against 2015-2020 of the coalition's track record, one will indeed notice the vast amount of work and efforts put in to address the demand for housing for our people. Permit me, sir, to share a few of our achievements. Sir, the honorable member, Mr. Jafral Ali, mentioned that the coalition did nothing. We have not created not one house lot in Region 5. But comrade, Mr. Speaker, let me tell you this. Let me tell you this, Mr. Speaker. Available lands for housing in 2019. Annandale on the east coast of Demerara. 329 house lots completed. Plantation Monrepo, 203 completed. Parcel 1145 Providence, 190 house lots completed. Cummins Large Parcel 1768, 370 completed. Plantation Prospect, the remaining area, 500 completed. Track N, X, and NY in LBI, sir, 447 completed. Experiment, sir, experiment, where my goodly friend Jafral Ali said that we never did, design. That we never did design, sir. Experiment, sir. This is our design. And from this design, sir, 673 house lots for experiment in west coast of Boobies. Don't let the honorable members come here fooling and palazzing themselves that the APNU, AFC did not do anything. These are my documents. Sir, since the installation of the honorable members in office, it seems from all angles that there isn't a structured approach or a plan for the housing sector. In fact, sir, there was none when we went into office in May of 2015. Not one housing policy. What the coalition did was a comprehensive analysis on the housing sector to address the challenges facing the government housing program here in Guyana. This is the document, sir, the facts. What is now evident in the housing sector is the Wild Wild West approach. Sir, I challenge the two honorable members in the housing sector to provide this House with an installed government housing policy. What I do know is that there isn't none. Since we keep hearing at interviews copycat approaches, while only served to flatter the coalition, they could take a cue from the first executive president of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, the late Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham. had a thorough housing policy for Guyana. The coalition's policy on the housing sector was also a comprehensive one. We didn't just hand out house lots, Mr. Speaker, with only the most basic infrastructure in place, then shout out, we have issued 50,000 house lots. Take a walk in East, West, North, South, Rumville, Tocqueville, Festival City, Roxanne Barnum, Shirleyfield, Ridley, and Perseverance that was created under the APNU, AFC coalition government. Just to name a few places. That's what a wholesome community should look like. That's what you call a visionary government. Sir, I will now clarify another item of misinformation, and this is the Hinterland housing program. They say, sir, how we abandon the Hinterland housing program. But as I stand here this afternoon, sir, I am going to say that is something that we inherited from the government, from the previous administration. We did not abandon it because we recognize that housing is important to our people. So what we did a lot of projects in regions number 1 and region number 9, where many communities benefited, including region 7, where many communities benefited from an entire, change of roof amongst every other thing, sir. So, sir, while I accept, they're saying that the APNU, we don't have a policy or a vision for the housing sector. But I will invite my honorable members to arm themselves with a copy, Guyana's Decade of Development. This is a document that was compiled by the former president of Guyana, David A. Granger, where he outlined in detail his plan, the 10 years plan to address the housing situation here in our country. This is the evidence. This is facts. Sir, I'm delighted to see that budget 2021, that we will be proceeding with the IDB funded program for adequate housing development for our people. And I wish to say to the honorable members on that side, do not claim the project. This project was conceived by the APNU AFC government, and I will be keeping a very close eye on that project, because we did extensive work through Central Housing and Planning Authority, where we interviewed persons and we identified those who will be benefiting from this project. In the estimates for 2021, I observed that the Ministry of Housing through CHMPA is requesting a whopping $6 billion Guyana dollars. And sir, I intend to ask some searching questions in this particular area.
Honorable members, the shouting and the continuous commentary, please allow the honorable member to continue.
Sir, two minutes on my first. Sir, take. Okay. Sir, in the interest of time, I wish to turn my attention to public works a bit. I wish to remind this House of the pathway set out by the coalition government to move and improve public infrastructure in Guyana. The government's strategic plan for the transport sector is premised on its belief that the transport infrastructure and services are central to the growth and development of the Guyanese economy and society. I know my colleague, the Honorable David Patterson, earlier today addressed some successes that our government would have done. But I wish to re-emphasize and highlight because, sir, we keep hearing that this government, the APNU, ain't do nothing. But look what is happening on the east bank of Demerara. 5 overhead pedestrian paths. You had 23 years, not a vision of that nature was conceptualized by you. The first roundabout at Kitty, it was the vision of a partnership for national unity. Look at all the reinforced concrete roads in regions number 8, regions number 1, and number 9. That is what you call visionary leadership. Sir, I know my colleague, the Honorable David Patterson, earlier did share what we were doing. And he referred to the 2017-2025 plan that the Ministry of Public Infrastructure had to move Guyana forward. If they follow this document, Comrade Leader, Comrade Speaker, Guyana will move in a positive direction.
For you to move on with your continuation, you need some more time.
Comrade Speaker, I do move that the honourable member be given 5 minutes to conclude her presentation.
Thank you, Honourable Member Mr. Patterson. Honourable Member, you may continue.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much, Mr. Chief Whip. Sir, I will now examine a few of the not so impressive measures which will or are likely to have impact on the sector areas addressed earlier. 1, reducing water tariff. Sir, by my calculations, if a metered customer consumption rate is $3,000 a month, then 5% of $3,000 will be $150. Sir, does the PPP really intend to provide an improvement of $150 a month to Guyanese? Mr. Speaker, that can't even buy a Coca-Cola. Mr. Speaker, that can barely buy a cheese roll. If the government wants to provide relief to Guyanese, they should just make water free. Which Guyanese is excited to get $150 benefit a month? This is a joke. The second measure, sir, reducing the cost of construction and home ownership. Sir, while this may be welcome, the reality here is that many Guyanese will not benefit. The question that jumps to one's mind is whether the low-income earner benefits. Will that single mother struggling to ensure that a meal is put on the table for her 5 children benefit? How will a public servant whose last salary increases was in 2019, who is receiving the minimum salary of $70,000 benefit? How will the vendor at the different markets, Water Street, Regent Street, and at their roadside benefit? How will the young man who each and every one of us passes in the center of our main access roads plying his trade by selling water benefit? Boldly, sir, I say that they will not benefit. What I do know is that once the installed regime embarks on mass production of houses, they will enter into agreements with the huge manufacturing companies where they will give a percentage off on certain items, and the final cost will be borne by the ordinary man. Reducing the duty on industrial grade cement, sir. Here I will say again, the ordinary and average Guyanese will not benefit. Rather, they will be the bugbearer for the importers and businesses. Let's face the facts and not just narrate fictions. The reality here, sir, is that an individual allocated a standard 40 by 100 plot of land and ready to commence construction of their private house will not use industrial grade cement. This is more applicable to the bigger boys who will be awarded contracts for the building of schools, roads, bridges, and other major construction. That's the fact. Sir, how many time I have? Sir, increasing the low-income mortgage low ceiling. Sir, while this may be a laudable initiative, I will summarize by repeating. Will that single mother struggling to ensure that a meal is put on the table for her 5 children benefit? How will a public servant whose last salary increase was in 2019 and receiving a minimum salary of 70,000 benefit? Well, it's for emphasis sake. The reality, sir, is that I had the opportunity of serving at the Central Housing and Planning Authority for a short stint and many days. I give my ears to those who visited to express their dissatisfaction and disappointment with the financing institutions. Rather than the installed regime working with institutions to increase the mortgage lending, they should find an alternate mechanism to help our people who are desperate and in vulnerable situations. I now conclude, sir. In conclusion, like my colleagues on this side of the House, I cannot, with good conscience, give my blessings to the passage of Budget 2021. Sir, it lacks substance. It's without guidance on what to expect in the regime's fight to combat COVID-19. It's not a budget for the ordinary man. It's not a budget for the youth, single mother. It's a budget created for economic genocide, for the poor. A budget with promises and fictions.
Honorable member, you need to conclude now.
Okay, I'm now wrapping up, sir. That will not be realized. A budget crafted without the input from the major and key parliamentary stakeholder.
Point of order.
Honorable Minister.
We cannot allow in this House phrases like economic genocide. If we can don't allow a word like nonsense, we cannot allow a word like economic genocide in this House.
Honorable Minister, please.
I
don't recognize that as a point of order. We can continue to conclude immediately.
Yes, sir, I'm doing just that. If I'm to support this document, I will be doing the public servants, nurses, teachers, police officers in ranks, military officers in ranks, single mothers and youths a disservice. Sir,
Thank you, Honorable Member. Your time is up.
I do not wish to be labeled
Thank you very much, Honorable Member.
traitor by the
Your
people I
time
represent.
is up.
Finally, sir, like my colleagues, I call on the government to ensure that public servants are given 10% wage increase retroactive from January.
Honorable Member and Minister of Home Affairs, the Honorable Robson Horatio Den. You may proceed with your contribution. Honorable members, please allow the Minister to make his presentation. Honorable Member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and honorable members. Mr. Chairman, Speaker, sorry. I'd like to first off congratulate the Honorable Ashley Singh for a wonderful budget presentation and the fact of the document, the fact of what it presents here to us in this House, in that it contextualizes where we are, what we need to do to move forward to make our country and our society better. Mr. Chairman, the last time I think I spoke here in this House, I deplored presentations which were made. I would have to say that I cannot, of course, match the wonderful presentation of Mr. Schumann, nor, of course, the Honorable Ashley Singh. But, Mr. Chairman, again, we've just had before me here in this House a delusional, deplorable, regrettable, and an infamous display and presentation from an honorable member, only honorable perhaps by convention in this House. Mr. Chairman, if Guyana is to become better and to be at peace and to have harmony, it has to begin here in this House with us. It has to begin here in this House, and it has to arise out of reasonable, responsible debate based on facts. And unfortunately, it seems now that we have a situation where the opposition, with the exception of Mr. Schumann, of course, are on a path of continuing to shape the situation for insurrection, for sedition, for targeting, for pivoting to the public servants, the police, the army, and all kinds of persons who they feel or who they want to create an image, a sense of victimhood in respect of how we need to do and how we need to move forward in our country. I think most of us are fairly well aware how we have landed to this place where we are. And when the Honorable Excellency, in correction, Irfan Ali came here to make his inaugural address to the Parliament, he spoke on one singular, particular theme: unity. Unity, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I don't know how we can achieve this unity, this great hope of the Guyanese people, if we continue to have engagements of this type in this House. Mr. Speaker, of course, and the Honorable Member Schumann reminded us of the experience we had here during the recount. And the Honorable Member Ashley Singh, who wrote this budget speech along with the support of his staff, had experiences when the government changed in 2015, which resulted in his being shackled along with others. He had to run out of the country. He had to leave his family. He was persecuted. But Ashley, thank you so much, my friend, for coming back to Guyana to work for the development of this country and to deliver a budget speech. Mr. Speaker, free of rancor, free of hatred, free of incitement. Much of that which we just saw again in this House. Mr. Speaker, I don't want to dwell so much on our other experiences in this House, but the point is that the honorable members on that side, except Honorable Schumann, of course, keep throwing up irresponsible statements in the face, no, I have to say it, in the face of the highest courts of the region, in the face of the observations and information of the OAS, the EU, the ABC, the British, CARICOM, the CARICOM recount team, who did a wonderfully professional work here in identifying who won the elections, and all these issues about 49 phantom or whatever ballot boxes, which you just said, was utter nonsense. Utter nonsense. But they keep repeating it because now I believe they're on a point, on a path where they,
Honorable Minister, nonsense and utter nonsense, you have to withdraw.
I withdraw
Honorable
those,
Minister,
I
please
withdraw those words. I withdraw those words. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Member, Ms. Manachan, you have a problem with my rulings?
Mr. Speaker, I withdrew the words. I apologize for using those words. But just to say, the presentations are deplorable. I think we are on a path where trouble is being stirred up. Having failed at winning the elections, they are bitter, extremely bitter. They're sourpusses. Their only intention now is to create trouble in this house and in this country. And this is why they will walk out. This is why they will walk out, because they don't want to debate, have a reason debate.
Minister, I want to interrupt you again. That's
Mr.
standing order on page 50. Sorry, the recommendation in the handbook. The speaker can disallow certain words too. So be careful how you construct the new words you want to.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the honourable member just now, and I spoke to the question of the recount. I heard the honourable member say just now, criticizing the COVID cash grant, but I understood she received hers. I heard the honourable member say that somebody didn't get a house lot, but I heard that she got more than one, maybe 4. That's what I heard. And I wish she were here, that she was here to deny or to confirm what I'm saying here now on the floor. I heard the honourable member say that they made the first roundabout in the city of Georgetown under the APNU AFC. There are several roundabouts in the city of Georgetown, Mr. Speaker. And in creating a roundabout, they destroyed a signalized section, signalized intersection to create a roundabout. Totally unnecessary and a waste. Mr. Speaker, I heard the honourable member say that they built 5 overpasses. I know with the WSG we discussed and designed these overpasses. We, of course, never designed elevators. We decided that it would have been better to put lights where people could press, to have the traffic stop, to walk across, because we feared that people will not use them because that was the experience in Trinidad. And that is what is happening now. So they're not being used. They're not being used. I heard the honourable member talking about transport infrastructure and all those things. Mr. Chairman, when they took over in they called it the Ministry of Public Infrastructure, we had already the money to build the Ogle Bypass Road from the government of India as a loan, $50 million US. We had the money, the agreement was signed by President Ramadan. Part of that money was to build a new boat to move from Georgetown Port to the northwest in 12 or 14 hours, rather than the 24 or 26 hours. We had the money. They did nothing with it. And the people are still suffering as a result of that. So, I mean, I could go on and on. They talk about imported cement and whatnot. Mr. Chairman, the significant term in our development equation, missing term really, is cheap power. And it's only now really that is being addressed in the discussions in the budget and in the work of Prime Minister, Honorable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, they stopped the Ibaila Falls project, a 165 megawatt project which would have given cheap power not only to Linden, but for the time being would have given us cheap renewable power. They stopped it. And they talk about the airport and all kinds of other things which they did wonderful things somehow. but thank you, AG. But it's distressful to come and again to try to debunk, and to, because they think that maybe if they say it often enough, people will believe these things. And that is why I'm fearful, and that's why we have to answer them. Mr. Chairman, dearest Mr. Speaker, somewhere there's a quotation that, and I'm being careful, the ready resort to charges of racism is the resort of scoundrels. And that is what we're seeing in this House. The ready resort to charges of racism is the resort of scoundrels.
That's another unparliamentary word.
Well, I withdraw it, having said it, sir. But, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate the Honorable Ashley Singh and his team for doing a wonderful budget, for putting in the energy, for having the discussions, for having even the skirmishes in relation to developing this budget, because we even had our own opinions and little arguments, but we are extremely satisfied with the result. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, again, I have to say, in accordance with the Constitution, electoral laws of Guyana, and the scrutiny of the highest courts of the land, with the dogged persistence of the electoral observer missions, the ABCs, et al., the OAS, the Council, the CARICOM return team, the will of the people of Guyana prevail, and shall prosper Guyana over all weapons formed against it in 2020. And Mohammed Irfan Ali, Mark Phillips, and Bar Jagyo were sworn in as President, Prime Minister, and Vice President, respectively. That is the will of the Guyanese people. The will of the Guyanese people. And yet, Mr. Speaker, when the President Ali was taking the salute and inspecting the Presidential Honor Guard on the occasion of his inaugural address to this Parliament, a would-be insurrectionist in dungarees video stage for a prosperity climbing over the gates of the Parliament, kicking a policeman in the head in the process. He was restrained from his feigned heroics, unfortunately with an inadvertent display of his buckler. Charges are still pending. And still again, Mr. Speaker, when President Ali and First Lady Arya Ali took the red carpet, APNU AFC members of this House took position to bellow fraud is fraud in a grossy display of hysterical, delusional self-confidence. Can we imagine that the fraudsters and riggers shouting fraud is fraud, and also coming to this House in debate speaking of a regime now in government as if merely saying so makes that true, against the simplest of sensibilities? Eternal shame, though, is already accorded them as their place in history. Mr. Speaker, I'm not a religious person, but we have the second comment of the PPC in government. The second comment. And Mr. Speaker, we have to work hard now so that our people can expect and experience the rapture of Guyana's development. The development tasks conceptualized in the manifesto of the PPPC are non-contextualized in the first of many budgets to be presented by Dr. Singh as Minister of Finance again. President Irfan Ali has spoken on his visions of enhancing national unity. irrespective of race, class, ethnic, religious, cultural, and political perspectives. He has repeatedly struck the necessary notes emphasizing fairness, justice, opportunity, equity, reward for diligent work, poverty and crime reduction, and improved health care. Unfortunately, again, Mr. Speaker, in spite of the traumatic events of the 2nd of March to August 8, 2020, the necessary taking of the available opportunity for retrospection and introspection has not been grasped by those whom we can best describe as the usual suspects, who in the usual manner continue to recklessly and luridly race-bait, conjure up fictions, alternative facts on the intent, purpose, and results of the past PPPC programs and projects. But worse yet, they have purloined those projects which they inherited and have advertised them decidedly as their own. I am amongst the first to consider the APNU AFC built a roundabout in Georgetown, replacing a signalized intersection and naming it the first roundabout in Guyana. At the macro employment level, they studiously avoided speaking about the 7,000 sugar workers they dumped out into the dams and streets without a care for the consequences on the 28,000 direct dependents of those workers, and the negative withdrawal of the synergistic economic impacts on another 70,000 persons of all races in the sugar industry. Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure those who are here representing them are perhaps competent, but I really would have liked to ask their leading lights, what is the problem they have with sugar and what is the problem they have with rice? What is the problem they have with sugar and rice? We all came through sugar and rice. The country developed through sugar and rice. Rice is a staple. Rice is a staple product. Both sugar and rice earn us foreign exchange. And that's the significance in it, beyond all the support Gaisuko gives in the communities, in drainage and irrigations, in the maintenance of dams, in the maintenance of sport grounds and health facilities and all those other things. They see rice and its difficulties, which they have accentuated in a very narrow way. A very narrow way. And somebody said today here, angry, that people were drying rice on the road. And I, as Minister of Public Works, and Bishop, I want to inform you of this. In the rice growing season, if there's not enough place to dry the rice, the road has to be used. It has to be used. If the rice crop fails, or if it goes with the wrong moisture, or we get red rice, Guyana loses, we lose, I lose. I've been in other countries, you see they throw onion on the road to dry, potato to dry. You got to go in the corner. In Canada, in Switzerland, when the cows go with the bells, everybody got to slow down and stop. And here we complaining about poor farmers drying rice in the road to get the best grade and quality for export. This is the fantasies which they create and speak about without thinking.
Honorable members, you regroup the thoughts. I will ask someone to move the suspension of the standing order so we can go beyond.
Mr. Speaker, I ask that the suspension is done in order to continue the debate.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, the actions taken by the AP and UAFC government suggest that forestry, fishing, quarry and construction, transport and mining, and yes, bauxite where the government allowed the blocking of the Berbice River, eventually putting paid to the Russell-Oldendorf combined operations. This activity also put paid to the jobs of 700 direct employment for Lindeners, Bokwaniites, Mapletown, and Huru residents, and another 400 jobs downriver at New Amsterdam and its satellite communities. And they will tell those people today and tomorrow that they love them and they must vote for them. But they're destroying their livelihood and the opportunities for the development of those people and the communities. Mr. Speaker, I accuse the AP and UAFC of undertaking those measures as a matter of policy. They had long lost the plot for national development and saw a new omnipotentate, the god of oil, oil which was not simply to be added as a new long-awaited asset to the development matrix, but one to be worshipped, idolized, and suckled up. Mr. Speaker, while I condemn the economic and resulting social policy of the AP and UAFC government, I hasten to condemn those now patented presentations which only see development through the vision of race and who seek to have us inflict on each other the hurt and pain meted out to all of us in circumstances over which we had no control. Mr. Speaker, Opposition Leader Honorable Member Harman, who appears to be eyeing a career in stand-up comedy, likened the budget to a plane that has somehow crashed before takeoff. Laughter aside, I am glad that he raised the imagery of flight in relation to the budget and what it portends for Guyana's future economic development. I had an opportunity recently to visit the western frontier and the Wapishana savannas to the south. In every instance, Mr. Chairman, despite the pressing anxieties imposed by the COVID-19 pandemic, the migrant and sovereignty issues posed by Venezuela, and the now dissipating tremors almost everywhere, almost everyone engaged was ebullient at the change in government and getting themselves ready for the path to recovery, economic dynamism, and resilience. Significantly, Mr. Speaker, the aircraft were flown by Guyanese pilots of different races, ethnic, and background, paired in the same cockpits, who did their tasks professionally and had our teams delivered and returned safely. I want to call on the opposition, AP and UAFC, to let us emulate the professional and skills, confidence, and engagement to have us in this honorable house prepare, take off, fly, and land this Guyana aircraft safely and without distress, because we are all on board and will all perish if we lose the unified control necessary for the safe operation and handling of a complex but enduring committee that Guyana represents. Now more than ever, the call for unity has to be answered, so we should not repeat the failures of the past, an example of which is the defeat in 1763, when tribalisms, clashing over social and economic roles and jealousy led to the guns going one way, the shot going the other way, and the powder going another way. We cannot fail again. Mr. Speaker, the budget speaks to the clearest path to take to recovery. We on this side of the House are determined to act responsibly so as to deliver what we must, a far better life than what we have had to future generations of Guyanese. The Honorable Member Ramjatan keeps carping and touting projects and activities in the Ministry of Home Affairs, which he says were new initiatives under his Ministry of Public Security. The raw facts of the matter are that almost every activity he or his booster point to have their genesis on the previous PPPC governments with Minister Clement Rohi. And Ramjatan, honorable member, as he is here, continues to sit with colleagues in what we have been advised is an abusive relationship, that of the ANC, APNU, AFC, oblivious to the disgraceful spectacle he presents. Mr. Speaker, I want to assure the honourable member that we are not tapping his phones. The question, though, now is how does he do it? How does he endure it? The action may lie, Mr. Speaker, in the use of self-medication, as I've worked. The honourable member Gita Chandan used a wonderful little word the other day when she said, poof. And I had a feeling that, as I was told, that if you scratch a match near the honourable member Ramjatan, he would go poof. Mr. Chairman, the budget speaks of path to recovery, economic dynamism, and resilience. For the Ministry of Home Affairs and its agency, this path is joined by emphasizing continuous improvement, diversity, professionalism, eliminating corruption, and optimizing resource use. For the safety and security sector, the goal is to increase the peace. And that is a watchword I want the ministry to adopt as we go forward. Our responsibility is to increase the peace. In service to Guyana, and in response to the critique of issues of the lack of public trust, poor response times, and inefficient resource allocation. The 2021 budget proposes billions of dollars for the sector and significant improvements over 2020. The safety and security of citizens, enterprise, and assets are vital to ensuring the development we must now have and to fulfill the long pent-up expectations of all with respect to the sector. These have to be met by diligent effort over the medium term. The implementation of rational policy, judicious programs, and practical projects, bolstered by continuous iterative review, monitoring, evaluation, optimizing, will see the Ministry of Home Affairs shake off the effects of malaise, misdirection, and corruption which has plagued it over the last 5 years during the AFP and UAFC's time in government. Mr. Speaker, this forced adjustments toward the institution of a new culture, focus, and commitment towards working to develop and improve the sector and to gradually improve public confidence in real terms. This is not expected to be easy, and we have already seen signs where the challenges to public order and security have raised their ugly heads. Not satisfied their failed efforts to rig on the national and international stage, the national election, significant elements of the political opposition have moved on seamlessly to promote racial divisiveness, violence, sedition, and politically inspired crime. A case in point is the gruesome murder event on the West Bank Demerara, West Bank Borbi, when Guyanese could not share their collective grief over the incident of the death of the Henry boys, but had to battle feelings of hatred, recrimination, retaliation as the horde was expanded by racial and criminal attacks on undeserving citizens as a result of incitement by the maximum leaders of the APNU AFC, Granger and Harmon, excellent and honorable as they are by conventions. Failure on that front has now slid over towards continual cries of racial victimization and a renewed resort to openly bail the public service into a collision course with the administration on, as has been tried and repeated often before, false grounds, alternative truths, and plain naked untruths. Mr. Speaker, the budget debate is being used by the opposition for an opportunity to seriously debate critical national issues, but as a platform to create and promote disunity and insurrection, which misguidedly they think they have the backing of even their own supporters. And were they not ridiculous, shameful, and dangerous, it would have been roiling entertainment to sit through the opposition presentations pressed on by many seemingly disillusioned advocates, both in the print, visual, and social media. Sure, it does hurt to lose an election, Mr. Chairman, but to claim victory and feign genuine disappointment against all facts, oft repeated with the benefits of the recounting against all the world, would only suggest that certain members have completely lost their senses or that mischief is afoot. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I am forced to start with some considerations of the Guyana Police Force, which has the responsibility for service and protection in relation to police. Mr. Speaker, the sum is allocated for making up for the degradation in mobile, fixed, and capital assets for the needed effort to stem rising crime, which has taken advantage of the lapses due to the pandemic and the malaise, real or induced, particularly during the elections in past. A review of the 2020 crime statistics indicate an overall reduction in serious crime by 6.9%. This reduction is predicated on the effects of the stay-at-home imperative retired by protection from the pandemic, as robbery under arms with guns, robbery with violence, breaking and entering and larceny, and burglary show declines, but murders increased by 13%. Year-to-date figures show a decline in serious crime by 40.3%. That's year-to-date 2021. This is viewed as a response to an increase in vehicle, motorcycle, and beat patrols, and also improving keenness of police ranks to engage in the rise in crime check.
Honorable Minister, you will need an extension.
Speaker, I'd like to ask that the honourable member be given 5 minutes to conclude his presentation.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Member, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The reduction due to provision by the government of resources in the form of 45 motorcycles and the support of vehicles on loan from government agencies, along with better use of surveillance cameras and intelligence, show the efficacy of this support. Mr. Speaker, in wrapping up, I want to go beyond the mere statistics and speak to particular issues which plague the police force and the prison service, and to identify plainly that there is need for better professionalism in the prison system. There is need for more empathy. I have repeatedly told the agencies that I don't want prisoners beaten. I don't want their food taken away. I have requested that the prison system plant 4,000 fruit trees to help improve the diet of the prisoners. I have asked the Minister of Agriculture for 4 shade houses to act as nurseries. And I said prisoners should be able to get a banana and an egg regularly. And that our responsibility is to rehabilitate prisoners and to return them to useful work in the society. There had been an outcry, Mr. Speaker, about the release of prisoners sometime, and I am aware that the Honorable Member Ramjatan had sent a text which was widely shared. And I'll read the first part. Ramjatan responds, Imran, just to correct a misconception surrounding early release for good behavior and upon the condition of serving a minimum of 1/3 of the imposed sentence. There is such a provision in our prison laws. I used it on several occasions as previous ministers on the recommendation of the director, and so on and so forth. On one occasion, I released about 100+ prisoners. I just wanted to clarify that in relation to the outcry whipped up in relation to the statutory release of prisoners, which I did for, I think, 65 persons. Mr. Speaker, I understand today that the opposition members, including Honorable Member Mr. Chandan, visited the Commissioner of Police. I have no difficulty in such a visit, but I have to take issue with a couple of things which I saw or heard of in relation to the visit. One, there was a suggestion and apology about the searching of honorable members coming to this house. I am of the view that every member should be searched, should make their attempts available for search. That at the last parliament, we came through.
Honorable Minister, that was a speaker decision. If you have a problem with it, there's a mechanism to address it.
I'm speaking on the floor, sir.
That's not the mechanism. You bring a motion.
Well, we could bring a motion, but I'm just saying that we are in circumstances where strange things could happen, and we could continue to do as we did at the parliament. Mr. Speaker, simply in closing, I want to, and I'm sorry the honorable member, Mr. Patterson, isn't here. And I wanted to just read some of the issues which occupy the efforts of the Special Organized Crime Unit. And I'll call them out quickly. One, investigations in the procurement of consultancy service for the feasibility study and design for the Demerara Harbor Bridge. Conspiracy to defraud country to common law on the 25th of January 2021. David Patterson, former Minister of Public Infrastructure, Ralston Adams, former GM of the Demerara Harbor Bridge. Both pleaded not guilty and were placed on $200,000. I wanted to ask Mr. Patterson here to return the jingles which he took, purchased with public money, to return the jingles to the people of Guyana, he and all the others. Bangles or jingles or whatever they are. Money laundering investigation, Orby Norton Martinez v. Passad. Money laundering investigation with regards to Yuri Garcia Dominguez. Soko versus Michael Bagot civil recovery case. Investigation with Shervinton Lovell for drug-related offenses. Investigation with respect to the alleged illegal sale and lease of Nissil lands. Soko versus Jacqueline Keynes civil forfeiture application. Investigation with respect to the Immigration and Support Services Department. But maybe I spent too much time on other things. I couldn't get into this one, but it's interesting. Mr. Speaker, forensic audit of the Police Finance Department. Mr. Speaker, an investigation is underway with respect to the Police Finance Department. There seems to be a revolving door between police finances and the Police Welfare Fund. For the last year, or part of the last year, an amount of $300 million are missing. Investigation launched into the issuance of firearm license issued by the Guyana Police Force within the period January 2018 and present. Well, the former Minister of Public Security is not here, so I couldn't pose a direct question to him in this matter.
Honorable Minister, you'll have to conclude.
So, this is my perhaps unfortunately meandering presentation. I think changed because of what was said before I came. I can only encourage honorable members, not only this on our side of the House, and I have no difficulty with their response, but also on the other side of the House, in respect of what we have to do to create and ensure peace in Guyana so we could have the development which we all want, and so that we could hand on, as I like to say, a better life than we have had to our children. A better life than we have had. That is our responsibility. Nothing else matters. So with that, Mr. Chairman, honorable members, thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The Honorable Member and Minister of Public Works, Minister One Edgehill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on this late Friday evening, I stand here to make my contribution and to lend support to Budget 2021 titled A Path to Recovery, Economic Dynamism and Resilience. A budget that was carefully crafted and presented by my colleague and the team at the Ministry of Finance, recognizing our technical staff throughout all of the various sectors, that will do Guyana good. This budget must be supported by all right-thinking Guyanese. Mr. Speaker, I stand here to make my presentation, and I would like to declare for you, for the benefit of all members of this House and all Guyanese, I am a manumitted Guyanese. I am mentally liberated. I'm from Africa, I have African ancestry. I'm a spiritually conscious human being, but I'm a politically informed citizen. I'm a leader that is committed to the unity and national reconciliation of this nation, and I believe in the oneness of our people. And I'm working towards pursuing our nation's motto, one people, one nation, and one destiny. Mr. Speaker, I say that to indicate that I'm extremely zealous and I'm very passionate about Guyana's future and Guyana's development. So as I speak here tonight, sir, I speak from that background. And I must indicate, sir, that the last time I checked, there is no transport lodged anywhere, any part of this country or any part of the world where any human being, system, or group or tribe owns me. I'm a free person. Mr. Speaker, in congratulating my colleague of many years who I enjoy working with, a man of class, skill, and patience, Dr. Ashley Singh, I would want to indicate to you, sir, that budgets, projects, plans, projects, programs, and policies. Budget 2021 is informed largely by that world-renowned low-carbon development strategy, the National Development Strategy, the Poverty Reduction Strategy, and the Competitiveness Strategy. What we are doing in Guyana is not pulling things out of thin air, but it is informed by well-documented strategies that benefited from wide consultation and had the input from the widest cross-section of Guyanese. So this plan, A Pathway to Prosperity, Economic Dynamism and Resilience, is crafted with the Guyanese people in mind. And that is why every right-thinking Guyanese should support Budget 2021. Mr. Speaker, listening and observing and making my own assessment from listening to my colleague, reading the budget speech and researching the numbers and looking at all of the various sectors, I've concluded that this budget provides for 8 things that I would like to indicate. Number one, sir, it provides for the building of the physical infrastructure to ensure the transformational development and modernizing of Guyana. When I speak about this, sir, I speak about what we could all look forward to: cheap, reliable energy. Starting the process of ensuring 400 megawatts of electricity to bring down the cost for manufacturing, for household use, and to ensure industrialization and light manufacturing. I speak, sir, of the possibility of having what the President described in this House as the corridor of development. Mr. Speaker, I'm referring to a new bridge across the Quarantine River, linking the island, Long Island, as a free port, free zone area, linking 2 countries, making it possible for Guyanese and others, international travelers, to move through South America, through Brazil, French Guyana, into Suriname, into Guyana, down the Linden Latham Road, over the Takatu, back into Brazil, and opening new possibilities for markets in South America. We are not talking bangles and bed sheets. We're talking major development. Corridors of development, sir, we're talking about. Mr. Speaker, we're talking about a new 4-lane, high-span concrete bridge across the Demerara River. Mr. Speaker, for the record, when we went out for expressions of interest, 21 companies showed interest. Just the other day, when we went out for expressions of interest for certain studies for the Quarantine River Bridge, 30 companies showed interest. You know what that means, sir? The world is looking at Guyana. The world is seeing opportunities in Guyana, and only those who are politically strangulated by anger and bitterness, they are unable to see the future of Guyana. Mr. Speaker, when we speak about the corridors of development, we're talking about the development of our hinterland, not just merely with access to roads, but with ferries, and with our coastal and hinterland airstrips. Since presiding as the team leader in this ministry, sir, we have had the opportunity of granting permission for new airstrips and new aircrafts because Guyana is taking off. One member said the budget crashed before takeoff. It depends where he's living. We're talking, sir, that this budget not only provides for the building of physical infrastructure, but it creates a framework that allows for social inclusion and oneness. I heard members of the opposition saying that this budget is discriminatory. Mr. Speaker, let me tell you how the budget discriminates. It discriminates in favor of more than 180,000 school children who will benefit by way of a $15,000 cash grant. It discriminates in favor of the 61,000 pensioners that the Honorable Minister Vindia Prasad spoke about, who will get an increase in their pensions. It discriminates in favor of our young and small businesses who have been provided $250 million to ensure there is capacity building and opportunity to go to the next level. That is how this budget discriminates. Mr. Speaker, it discriminates in favor of the Amerindians of our country, our indigenous people, our brothers and sisters of the 215 villages scattered across our country, to ensure that they get electricity, even though not on the grid. The Honorable Pauline Sukai spoke to that not so long ago today, sir, where there will be 35,000 household units moving from 65 watts to 150 watts, going to every household in the interior and our riverine areas. This is how this budget discriminates. This budget discriminates, sir. Yes, the opposition says it discriminates. It discriminates in favor of our young people. That the Honorable Charles Ramson would have the opportunity to go into their communities and to develop capacity in their community centers, to provide the sporting equipment, to give them safe spaces to hang out and recreate, to play and to educate and to socialize in safe areas, which will mean less work for Minister Ben in the crime and security sector. That is how this budget discriminates, sir. So I really think that we have colleagues that are not in their right mind. Mr. Speaker, thirdly, this budget promotes and encourages the entrepreneurial spirit of our people. It encourages innovation. It creates opportunities. And certainly, it is ensuring a pathway to prosperity. Mr. Speaker, I believe in charity, but I have a greater belief and hope that what people believe is not just merely charity, but opportunities. And that is why when you look at the measures in the budget, opportunities for home ownership, opportunities for expansion of your business, opportunities for small businesses to grow, opportunities for young people to get online scholarship. I was pleased when I learned from my colleague Minister of Education that a teacher could be in a remote area, teach all day, still study and graduate without having to leave her children there because of online learning. That is what this budget is doing, sir, creating opportunities. Mr. Speaker, this budget is also correcting the wrongs of the past. Yes. You know, Mr. Speaker, if we to spend time tonight speaking about the wrongs of the last 5 years, we will be here for a very long time. But a lot of my colleagues have eloquently already placed on the record the wrongs of hardships and difficulties. And while I'm at this, Mr. Speaker, let me just say something. It would appear that there is a grave misunderstanding as it relates to the PPPC's model of development. Mr. Ramjitan, the honorable member, accused us of borrowing. Mr. Speaker, you heard the word borrowing. Every Guyanese who's listening to me on this Friday night would love to get themselves qualified where they could go to the bank and borrow. Why they want to borrow? Because you want to accelerate your development. You want to improve on your possibilities of prosperity. When the PPPC borrows, sir, we don't borrow for a parade. They borrow to build a stadium to have a parade. When we borrow, sir, it's to invest. That in the years to come, that investment pays for itself. We go out based upon our track record of having been able to bring down our difficulties as it relates to our debt worthiness, that we could now go out on the international market and we could borrow at concessional rates, 20 years, 30 years, 1%, 2%. And you know what that is doing for us, sir? Helping us to accelerate our development. Listen to the APNU's model of development, taxation. And even when they borrow, sir, it's to spend on cheese straw, Grey Goose, meals at the Marriott Hotel, consuming items that makes no sense. Mr. Speaker, I understand the bitterness of the Honorable Member Ferguson when she spoke earlier tonight. You know what she missed, sir? I have the documents, I could produce it to the world, so let me be challenged. The Marriott account was her personal petty cash. Every time she's going to the Essequibo, 600,000. She's going to the Rupununi, 900,000. She's going to Wakenham. Mr. Speaker, we all know under every ministry, monies are given for travel and subsistence, which includes allowing ministers to be financed to do their governmental work. Why are you dipping into an agency, writing letters, Mr. Speaker? It was her personal donation club as well. For gospel concert, and I wouldn't call the name, $2 million of Marriott money, sir. So I could understand the bitterness and the frustration. Mr. Speaker, the benefits of the brooches and the gifts and the bed sheets and the laptops and the unending list of items that were bought from agencies from Minister Ferguson and Patterson while they served as ministers and minister within the Ministry of Public Infrastructure is well documented, and it's a shameful act. People's monies must not be used for your personal gain. You are put there to serve. You're already salaried and taken care of with allowances and benefits. Why are you using the funds from agencies? Mr. Speaker, the fact will show. The Guyana Civil Aviation Authority had in excess of $1 billion when we left office in its reserve. Minister Robeson Ben was the minister at that time. Marriott had billions of dollars available to it. Thanks to the chairmanship of a famous Mr. Larry London, last year we had to give GCAA $460 million, and this year we have to give them money again. Do you see the difference in the models of development? That is the model. The money is gone, but nothing to show. Mr. Speaker, we are here tonight debating a $383.1 billion budget. But in the last 5 years, 2015, 16, 17, 18, and 19, the APNU AFC spent $1.3 trillion. And Mr. Speaker, let me break this down for the ordinary Guyanese. A trillion is 1,000 billion. What do they have to show? We heard tonight a roundabout, 5 overpasses, and Dorman Park. And the arches were donated. The arches were donated, Banks DIH and Nancy McCall. Why would you want to put that as an expenditure when it was donated? Mr. Speaker, we on this side of the House would not be intimidated, condemned, or either manipulated by the opposition, who is coming here as with their sanctimonious gangsterism about saying how they would like to have this and they would like to have that and they would like to have this and that. When they were there, the only things they would like to have are the things they took for themselves. We in the PPPC bring to this nation a culture of servant leadership. Yes, we lead, but we lead by serving our people. That is why we are rooted in the base. That is why you can see us on the ground. That is why we visit the villages. That is why we run the boats going up to every creek. That is why we're in every community. That is why we reach out to Afro, Indo, Chinese, Portuguese, Brazilian, Santonton, Douglas, anybody.
The Honorable Deputy Speaker on the floor.
Mr. Speaker, I stand on a point of order. The honorable member is imputing my character.
I beg your pardon, Mr. Schuman. I respectfully bow to you, sir. All except Mr. Schuman. So we got some wrongs to right, sir. Mr. Speaker, if you look around now, we had an emergency budget. And I could say this without fear of contradiction because it's happening across the country. Everybody want their roads fixed. I'm sure you will tell me that about your roads as well, Mr. Speaker. You know what we did when we went into the ministry? We sent out our engineers to every NDC and RDC to consult. Every NDC was to name the 2 top priority roads for fixing. We didn't discriminate by where Indians live and where Africans live. We fixed roads. As I stand here to speak tonight, 168 roads are under construction throughout the length and breadth of Guyana. And Mr. Speaker, let me just say this while I'm on this point. You know what was our implementation rate at the Ministry of Public Works for 2020? 95.7%. Moving from 57 and 61% over the last 5 years. Mr. Speaker, we got to right the wrongs. The children were denied $8 billion plus. We are righting that wrong. We're giving them back their money. The senior citizens of this country were denied their water subsidy. We are righting that wrong. We're giving it to them. Our young people had to line up at the Ministry of Housing for house lots, and nothing was happening. Only selected people were getting, and you had to do all kinds of gymnastics on the table and under the table to get through. We are righting that wrong. Our farmers had to face difficulties with D&I charges. We are righting that wrong. This budget is righting wrongs. Number 5, Mr. Speaker, this budget is ensuring the health and well-being of our citizens. It's advancing our intellectual development. It is retooling our workforce with the skills needed to service the traditional as well as the new and emerging sectors. Mr. Speaker, I speak of oil and gas. I speak of ecotourism and our hospitality industry. I speak about agro-processing and light manufacturing and plantation agriculture and our biodiversity services. I'm not just speaking about rice, sugar, bauxite, forestry. We are expanding, and we have to add to that information communication technology. So when you hear from our colleagues on this side of the house, the infrastructure is being set. Physical infrastructure, legislative infrastructure, the economic framework to ensure that all of our sectors are moving together, that the regression that we had over the last 5 years will be experienced a turnaround. Hence the title of our budget, A Pathway to Prosperity. We're cutting new grounds to make that happen, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this budget also provides for the safeguarding of the vulnerable amongst us. A country is not just judged by the great things that they do, but by how we treat the vulnerable in our society. The helpless, the downtrodden, the poor, the underprivileged, the differently abled, our single mothers, who I wish that our men would be more responsible, and we don't have so many of them. This budget speaks to those issues. We believe in human development. Dr. Chetty Jagan articulated a new global human order. Yes, economic development, but with a human face, ensuring benefits to real people. This budget, sir, caters for the defending of our sovereignty, ensuring the safety and the security of our people, and ensuring eventually that there is adequate investment in our future, safeguarding our future. This budget, sir, when I read and go through it and look at the numbers and the allocations that are made, it will stabilize communities. It will keep families together. I believe it will expand the middle class. It will promote the development of our small businesses. More than anything else, it will ensure that everyone have a seat at the table, because there is equal opportunity and equal access. Mr. Speaker, I have observed a trend that is developing in Guyana, especially by those who have lost political power and believe that if they say something often enough, people will believe it to be true. The Honorable Member, Mr. David Patterson, stood up in this House and said all the projects that the PPPC is pursuing were conceptualized, designed, and funded by the APNU AFC. Then I heard the Honorable Minister Ferguson not so long ago, former minister, saying that the Sheriff Mandela and the adequate housing project was their concept and they funded it. Myself and Dr. Ashley Singh had to look at each other and smile. Mr. Speaker, that was a $66 million IDB loan, and I'm sure the person who would have signed that loan, the signature would be Ashley Kumar Singh. They refashioned that money, sir. And they did what they wanted to do. And up until now, Sheriff Mandela ain't done. As a matter of fact, when I assumed office, there was nothing going on in Sheriff Mandela. It was stopped. I'm happy to report to the House tonight, sir. Yes, Mr. Patterson accused myself and my colleague, Minister Indar, of the only thing that we do is fire people, and I'm coming to that. He said we don't do nothing. Well, the Sheriff Street Mandela got 9 subcontractors and 19 sites being worked on simultaneously as a result of my intervention. I don't do nothing, sir. I don't do it. I make it happen. Mr. Speaker, when we got into office, we left $50 million. Minister Robeson Ben was the minister at that time. Donald Ramatar was the president. India had allowed for us to fund $50 million to build a road link between the East Coast and the East Bank. We left office 5 years after we went back. Nothing. As a matter of fact, it moved from 50 million to 208 million. And they were busy doing their things there to see how they could get the best deals to give the lands to their friends, cronies, and families along the alignment. Mr. Speaker, the Indian government representative in Guyana worked on India's Independence Day to facilitate the PPPC's administration, to reformat and get that project going again. And in budget 2021, monies are allocated because the work will begin in the latter part of this year. We are going out to the procurement process. We left the money, we left the road, they do nothing, and the man will stand up here, sorry, sir, the honorable member, will stand up here and say he conceptualized it. He was in Donald Ramatar's mind, president of Ghana at that time, when he went to India. Mr. Patterson was in the mind of Donald Ramatar, conceptualizing that project and funding it. Unbelievable how people will come here and pontificate. Mr. Speaker, there must be some penalty somewhere in this word for Kavakamitism. Mr. Speaker, the airport, the Chedi Jagan International Airport Modernization Project, conceptualized by David Patterson, according to the honorable member in this house. The agreement under Minister Robson Ben again. 2011, Mr. Patterson was the conceptualizer. He was in Robson Ben's physique. And funded by him. Money's coming from the China Exim Bank, not the APNU bank account. When they got into office, you know what they did, Mr. Speaker? They shrink the footprint of the airport. They make it smaller, cut out all of the other works that should have been done to facilitate commercial offices, food courts, reduce the amount of boarding bridges, and $23 million disappear from the contract. Well, the minister that does nothing, as he claimed, did something. That's when I assumed office, I went to the airport. The president himself went to the airport. And after a while, he led the team. President Irfan Ali led the team. And we said to the Chinese, we are not accepting this. Clear language. The same people that Mr. Patterson sat with and got $23 million and smiled, when they realized the no-nonsense, pro-people approach of the Irfan Ali administration, where we believe in value for money, where we believe the people of Guyana must get what they're paying for, we have now an amicable settlement, sir, where the same people will now provide corridors for 2 additional boarding bridges.
Honorable Minister, you will need an extension of time to tell us about these bridges.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member, I'd like to seek 5-minute extension for him to conclude. Well, as there's no one here, Mr. Speaker, I don't see why we can't give him 10.
Because Honorable Minister, I was presented with a list amending the standing orders.
Mr. Speaker, may I proceed?
Honorable Minister, please proceed.
Yes, sir. With that airport now, sir, we will have a new curtain wall. We will modernize the airport. They have to put up the superstructure that will allow for shops, and we have to get work done to ensure that the airline have offices and there's other commercial space. And the honorable member was so bold to stand up in his presentation and say, here know what the money in the budget is for. The estimates are coming, sir, we will deal with that. Mr. Speaker, this budget allows us to be able to move things in its proper perspective. The other thing I want to address, sir, is the honorable members say how we fire people. Mr. Speaker, he said we fired the general manager of the Demerara Harbor Bridge. I have his resignation in my office. He said we fire the general manager of Marad. The general manager of Marad is a man by the name of Mr. Stephen Thomas. The person who was the general manager was promoted and brought to my office as the ministerial advisor on maritime affairs, but has since been asked to go because of a number of issues. The Hinterland coordinator, the man said I fired. Minister Robson Ben sat right there and sent me a WhatsApp showing me of what was happening at 14 miles Madia. Isano, 14 miles Isano. The Hinterland coordinator that he said I fired has been dispatched to the area to correct what is going on there. But you know what he's worried about? It was a gentleman who accompanied him when he visited China and the Macau in China. Macau. Macau. He said a procurement specialist was fired. Mr. Speaker, I don't have a procurement specialist at my ministry. He said the coordinator of the work services group was fired. Mr. Vaughn is on public record telling everybody in Guyana, please don't drag me into the politics. And the man will come here and say, oh, I fired the man. Do you see what we're talking about? But it's the same man who told the nation when I broke the news that he had taken a bangle from the Demerara Harbor Bridge that says he don't even wear jewelry, don't like jewelry. When he was caught with the jewelry on his hand, photographs appeared across the country. He then started dancing and saying something different. Mr. Speaker, you know why I went there? I could have let this pass. But the people of Guyana should know when the APNU AFC speak, don't believe nothing that they say. The Honorable Member Annette Ferguson stand up there and say she will speak the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Oh, Mr. Speaker, the truth is not a person. The truth cannot be decorated with hairstyles and jewelry and brooches and cannot sleep on comfortable king-size bed with bed sheets. The truth is the truth. It needs no crutches. If it does, it's a lie. It stands by itself. It is the same people who stood up and told the people of Guyana they won the elections and Mr. Granger would be sworn in. They were mobilizing people to come several times for swearing in. It is the same people, Mr. Speaker, who deceived their own supporters, and told them that they won the elections. And they're coming here to rewrite history and to make all kinds of things. Mr. Speaker, during the time of the consideration of the estimates, I will deal with the numbers and the allocations that are in the budget. But I want to indicate to you, sir, Budget 2021 provides hope for Guyanese. A modern Guyana, superhighways, modernization. What you saw when entering New York, you will see while you drive in your cars in Guyana. What we've been dreaming about is about to happen. And the leadership of President Ali and the PPPC will take Guyana safely to that destination. I invite all Guyanese to come to the table and let us sit together and join in this path on working together for a prosperous Guyana. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. I now call on the Honorable Member, Dr. Tandika Smith, to make our presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am truly humbled to stand on the government side of this House to give my contribution to Budget 2021. A path to recovery, economic dynamism, and resilience. A budget that truly reflects the epitome of visionary policies, plans, and programs of our government. It is one that will certainly see the resuscitation of our economy, the improvement of livelihood for all Guyanese, and most of all, one that will create a solid foundation for sustainable economic development that will help secure the future for many generations to come. Mr. Speaker, before I proceed further in this debate, permit me to register my sincere gratitude to the Honorable Senior Minister in the Office of the President with responsibility for finance, Dr. Ashni Singh, and his hard-working team for their unwavering dedication and commitment in preparing a people's budget. Mr. Speaker, after occupying my seat in this honorable House for the past 3 days, it is difficult to not notice the many delusional and misleading statements coming from the honorable members of the coalition opposition as they lauded the hard work and development undertaken by their government. Like every other Guyanese, I am convinced that the only hard work they have done was to work hard on destroying the economy of this country. They worked hard to empty the pockets of the working class and the poor and ordinary man by adding so many taxes, to basic food items, and many other entities. They worked hard on creating employment by firing 7,000 sugar workers and 2,000 Amerindian CSOs. And that is why today they can only boast of works that are a mere figment of their imagination. And it is evident that they are competing with the fictional characters of the famous fairy tale books Alice in Wonderland and Pinocchio. The distortions of their perception of change, a good life, and progress is insanely unbelievable and a blatant insult to the intelligence of every Guyanese, and more so their own supporters. The untruth spewed by the coalition opposition is venomous and shameful, and it is sickening to see that the very political party that plundered the public's purse, did nothing for our country, stand there without remorse, knowing fully well that it was under their government many families went to bed without a meal. Persons lost their place of abode. Our school children dropped out of schools. The dreams of many young people to attend a university, to achieve higher learning was shattered simply because the children of the cronies or party members became a high priority. To my fellow young people and all right-thinking Guyanese, I implore you to remain cautious and conscious of what the APNU-AFC coalition stands for. It is anti-progress, anti-cohesion, anti-youth development, anti-poor people, and most of all, anti-democracy. I wish to tell you, always be reminded that it was under the very coalition government you did not enjoy a good life as promised. Opportunities and employment became foreign to them. Healthcare, education, agriculture, and major sectors collapsed under their watch. And most of all, democracy was under siege for 5 long months. Your basic right to freedom of choice was held hostage simply because of an uncaring and kleptocratic government. Be watchful. Our future generation must never endure what we endured under the APNU-AFC coalition, and certainly should never have their right to freedom of choice violated or held hostage. Mr. Speaker, I now turn my attention to the health sector. Mr. Speaker, it is no secret that under the previous administration, like many other sectors, the health sector suffered immensely due to mass corruption and mismanagement of public funds, which saw the lack of basic medication countrywide, crippling of basic healthcare services such as ultrasonography, x-rays, basic laboratory tests such as biochemistry, serology, amongst others. Today, under this government, we have the pleasure to revamp this sector under the stewardship of the Honorable Minister, Dr. Frank Anthony, who understands and knows the importance of the delivery of quality health care to a nation. Our health sector will receive a whopping $53.5 billion, one of the largest in many years. And this simply means that every program within the Ministry of Health, such as maternal and child health care, mental health, chronic disease, reproductive health, just to name a few, will benefit extensively from this allocation. A total of $70 billion will be allocated to replenish the shortage of medications for psychiatric patients. Additionally, programs will be implemented to address mental health and suicide prevention with an extension to hinterland communities. Mr. Speaker, our high-risk expectant mothers in areas such as Moruca, Cato, and Enmore will be able to benefit from maternal waiting homes provided for them at the cost of over $140 million. Mr. Speaker, we recognize the importance of safe and modernized infrastructure that will aid in the delivery of reliable and high standards of healthcare services, and that is why $2.8 billion has been allocated to ensure same. Of this, the Smart Hospital project at Leonora, Lethem, Paramakatoy, Mabaroom, and Diamond will see upgraded services. Clearly, this is a visionary path that our government will embark on to ensure no community, big or small, is left behind, as was done under the previous government. Mr. Speaker, our health sector has been plagued with a large number of non-functional or faulty medical equipment in various health facilities. This will be resolved because $1.8 billion has been allocated to purchase critical medical equipment to furnish this void. Mr. Speaker, as we continue to combat the COVID-19 pandemic, our government remains committed in protecting the well-being of our healthcare workers, our population at large, and to roll out vaccination with the goal of achieving herd immunity by the end of 2021. To show our appreciation, already our healthcare workers have received a 2-week bonus plus a $25,000 one-off cash grant, and this was also extended to all public servants. The accessibility to PPE, sanitizing agents, COVID-19 test kits, and other medical supplies will improve significantly as compared to what was provided by the previous government at the discovery of patient zero in mid-March 2020. Our administration has also acted responsibly and ramped up testing from conducting 21 tests daily to over 200 tests with a capacity of over 2,000. Mr. Speaker, a total of $750 million has been allocated to support the rolling out of the COVID-19 vaccines, which will see healthcare workers, the elderly, and persons with comorbidities being the first recipients. And already, our healthcare workers have benefited from the first batch of the COVID-19 AstraZeneca vaccine. Mr. Speaker, these are only some of the developments to be expected within our health sector for 2021. And I'm sure the Honorable Minister, Dr. Frank Anthony, will elaborate more on this. Mr. Speaker, as one of the geographical MPs representing region number 3, I must say, to mention that this region was neglected by the previous administration is an understatement, because immediately after getting into office in 2015, Region 3 became completely invisible to them. The evidence of not one new housing scheme in the entire Region 3, the deplorable state of roads and inadequate or no water supplies in places such as Wakenham, Legwan, Tushin, Dilat, Parika, and just to name a few. The many cries for our house lot from the residents, the single mothers, the fishermen, teachers, nurses, doctors, and others. The unfinished, for example, the unfinished stelling at Legwan is another example that under the APNU government, they never had a plan or could have delivered anything tangible to this nation. Mr. Speaker, as we have discovered in our fact-finding, it was found that 2 X-ray machines were placed at the Parika Health Center and the Legwan Cottage Hospital in a room with no electricity, no dark room, or even proper paper trail of how they got there. The only information available was that they were placed there 3 years ago, non-functional and gathering dust. While residents suffered and had to reach into their pockets to travel to long hours to either private institutions or the regional hospital to get an X-ray done. This is truly shameful. Mr. Speaker, this will no longer be the state of affairs under the PPPC government. Already road works have begun in Tushin, Zealot, Wakenham, and many other areas in Region 3, and this is only the beginning of the good things to come under our government. Mr. Speaker, on December 24, 2020, at a historical event of a Dream Realized housing drive held at the Leonora Track and Field, our honorable ministers of housing and water distributed 700 land titles, and over 1,000 persons received allocations for a plot of land. Mr. Speaker, this speaks volume of what our government stands for. Mr. Speaker, our regional cottage hospitals will receive medical equipment such as anesthesia machines, ultrasound machines, digital x-ray machines, improved ambulance services, and many other medical supplies. Mr. Speaker, this is what a visionary government does. It looks after the well-being of its people. And as always, a PPP government will ensure that every single Guyanese gets a piece of the pie. We will ensure that no one is left behind. And this includes the honorable members of the opposition, which of course are not here at the moment. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion,
I think you may have to...
I apologize, Mr. Schuman. I do recognize your presence. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, I wish to commend Budget 2021 because it is a budget that will give relief to every single Guyanese and will restore all of the loss that we had under the previous government. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member Dr. Tandika Smith. Honorable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I move the adjournment of the Assembly to 10 a.m. on Monday, the 1st of March, 2021.
Honorable members, the Assembly now stands adjourned 10 a.m. Monday, March 1st.
We are a peaceful people. Struggle is we struggle, and we don't look for trouble. Just ask around. But when outside faces from foreign places